Welcome back to ANC Connect with me, your host, TJ Maslela. In today's show, we're going to be discussing CoSAS as they celebrate their 45th anniversary. With that, we're going to be touching the basic education, the history of it, and what to expect moving forward with the ANC manifesto. Here to give us insight is none other than the national convener of CoSAS, Mr. Unesongo. Welcome to the show.
I greet you all. Thank you so much to you for welcoming me into the ANC Connect podcast. And yes, it is true, we're having our 45th anniversary tomorrow. On the 24th of May. We do want to, before even I proceed, my name is Unesongo Matikinca, and I am indeed the national convener of CoSAS NCPT team. We are celebrating our 45th anniversary on the 24th of May, and we do want to encourage learners specifically to come in their numbers to attend our anniversary so that they could hear the plan that we have going forward as part of embracing and bring about development in the basic education system.
Okay. Let's take a step back. Introduce yourself and your journey. I assume you're still in school. How did you get into CoSAS?
Well, I was introduced into the concept of politics in 2019 when I was doing my grade 8, introduced by another politician, an individual, in fact, not even saying the vast majority of political parties who tend to have voices out there. And so my fitting structure to lead at the time was a structure within CoSAS because, of course, I was obviously in high school, and so I couldn't just jump to leading the ANC Youth League at the time. So I went into politics that way, being introduced by this individual, grew in politics as an individual, led in the Eastern Cape structure, a provincial structure as provincial chairperson, led as provincial secretary, grew to also lead the ANC Youth League in the branch level, also to lead the YCLSA at a district level. So that could be, in a nutshell, my journey in politics up until this point where I was appointed as the national convener to lead now the majority or all students, in fact, in the entire country, South Africa.
You've done all of this in how many years?
So between 2019 and 2024.
No, I mean, in your life of living, how old are you?
Now I am 19 years old.
Okay, no, shout out. Why CoSAS in particular?
Well, CoSAS is a student organization that is the loudest in South Africa. Number one, you will never find any learner organization in South Africa that is as loud as CoSAS. And there's no politics in any other area except within the ANC, where you will find an organization affiliated or associated with the ANC that wants to actually transform the education system as CoSAS wants to. So again, that ambition that I had at the high school level of actually creating a space where education actually grows and gets developed became something that I wanted to pursue. I hated the fact that at some point, without me being in a position of power or leading or being a member of some political organization of some sort, I didn't really have a voice. And so I wanted that voice of mine to be heard and my views to actually be heard by everyone. And so I thought to myself that let me take a stand about this one and actually venture into politics so that I don't only now raise my own voice, but also speak for the entire majority of learners who might have had the very same needs or even more needs than myself at the time.
Can you give us a bit of a background as to CoSAS and how that actually came about? Because you triggered me when you were talking about the transformation of the education system. So what's the history of CoSAS?
Well, CoSAS has a very deep-rooted history. It's something that's quite unique to history of other organizations. It is a formation that happened through the Bantu education system, which was being enacted as a law, in fact, in South Africa during 1960 up until during the beginning, in fact, of the apartheid, up until it ended in 1994. CoSAS came in as a student movement that was formed as a result of the vibrance of the today known Black consciousness movement, which was formed by Steve Biko. It came about as a movement that was a result of the Soweto uprising. The Soweto uprising, which brought about a student movement called the SASM, South African Student Movement, which in its own was not moderate enough to actually transform and to become fully transformative in actually pursuing the development and the transformation of the education system. And so the decision to form a CoSAS, also as an affiliate of the ANC, which was also a main participant in fighting against the apartheid system, was taken by main political prominent figures, in fact, like your Oliver Tambo there. So it was formed in that way. It is a result of a struggle that was fought for by a number of learners in South Africa to try and attain a better education that taught them in their language of choice, that taught them the languages that they wanted to actually learn, not an education system that taught them Afrikaans, as it were, during the Bantu education era. So CoSAS has that deep-rooted history, and if it is, of course, an organization that was formed as a result of the ANC's need to actually fill each and every space in South Africa during the time with political awareness of the issues that were transpiring in South Africa, so as to bring transformations. It is.
So, okay, you mentioned the student components and the challenges. So here's CoSAS, here's ANC. What's the link?
CoSAS is number one. It's before it is linked with the ANC, or after it is linked with the ANC. Any of the two, one would speak. They don't really mean anything different. It is a Progressive Youth Alliance structure. It is within the Progressive Youth Alliance, which is a body or an organization of a structure such as your ANC Youth League, the YCLSA, SASCO, CoSAS. All of those organizations are actually affiliates or associates of the African National Congress. It's structures that affiliated with the ANC during the history of South Africa, which involved apartheid, because they shared the same vision and the same objectives with the African National Congress. And so during the time, the political organizations mentioned, the student organization SASCO, student organization CoSAS, actually affiliated with the ANC. The ANC became a body that actually supported their struggle. And so we link with the ANC in that, not that we are dependent in it, or we are a branch of the ANC, or we are in fact a wing of the ANC as the ANC Youth League, the Veterans League, and the Women's League, but we are just an associate of the ANC, which is also associated with many other MDM structures that are there, such as your SASCO, your SANCO, SACP, and COSATU.
So we, as you indicated, that basically CoSAS came about fighting the Bantu Education Act, which was basically the Apartheid Act, and ended in 1994. We know that back then, under the Bantu Education Act, there was confined in terms of the languages that were taught. There were certain subjects that people would say, okay, like a woman, you are, example, girls were only taught needlework or things like that, that the government at the time saw fit. Now, moving from 94, what has been the progress in the education system that's been led by ANC and COSATU working together?
Well, transformation has been too big. We are of a view that taking South Africa from the state that it was in before 1994 to the state that it is in currently is one of the most impossible things, in fact, for some African countries. We had, before 1994, perhaps a population of about 8 million people that were catered for, and a population of about 36 million people that were not catered for before 1994. And those people were Black people with many children, in fact, that needed to actually access the lower education system. So we are speaking of an ANC that took people, a number of about 36 million people out of poverty and bringing them into the current state of being that they are in through its diverse and transformative programs that it has achieved thus far. So that achievement on its own is something that many countries, in fact, in comparison, failed to actually do. Yet they've been freed in 1970, in the 1970s, 1960s, and 1980s. South Africa got its freedom only in 1994, but was able to actually achieve transformation as though a country that was actually assisted by every other international body that is out there, but it is also a country that grew from the grassroots, a country that was coming from disunity, a country that was coming from poverty of black people, a country that was coming from marginalization, a country that was coming from a lot of bad things that one could think of. But today we are saying that there's a purity in the freedom that actually our great grandfathers fought for. There's purity in democracy. We are able to have free services in our education sector. Before, you would have a black child not having anything to eat. For example, you speak of inside your school, even outside of your school, no one really cared what the child ate. But today you have feeding schemes. Today the ANC is even able to provide food parcels to children who are in need, so that even when they are at home, not only when they're at school, they could still have something to actually eat. We have programs that fund our education. We have programs that fund us from primary school level up until higher education level. Many people, in fact, have had degrees and have become businessmen and entrepreneurs in their respective fields because of the work of the ANC. So there's been a great transformation, quite frankly, in the education system in general, even though there's still a lot to be done, because even ourselves as CoSAS, as we stand, we have our own complaints towards the government of the ANC, but we believe that there is better to be done, but there is even greater that has already been achieved. And so we're also very thankful and appreciative of that fact.
In terms of the schooling system, right? Can you break it down? That there's ones that one pays for. There's ones that there's basic and secondary education, which is paid for, one by the state and one by individuals. Can you break that down for some that don't understand the system and who qualifies for what and when?
Well, South Africa is created in a joint system of let me say, in a lack of a better word, capitalism and communism. It's created so to cater for privatization as well as catering for nationalization at the same time. So of course in South Africa we are going to have a private sector or a private education that requires people to actually pay. That is when we speak of your IEB, the Independent Education Board, that also produces, in fact, brilliant students or brilliant learners in South Africa who become successful as citizens in our country and who embrace, in fact, economic growth, as it were. So it is always the choice of any South African, in fact, because there's no law that restricts a certain type of South African from entering into the NSC part of education, which is the one that doesn't really pay much school fee. NSC, that is the National Senior Certificate, where you write an examination that is set by the National Department of Basic Education as the entire country. So there's no restriction as to whether or not you can enroll into that. And there's no restriction, of course, as to whether or not you can enroll into IEB. The only restriction that would be there in IEB is the funds that they would want you to pay. Now, within the education system itself, you are going to find fee-paying schools. Those are probably going to be schools between quintile 4 and quintile 5. Now, the basic provision, or one thing that is provided for those schools, is that, yes, the student or the learner will pay a lot of money, but there's going to be a type of support or type of recognition that the school will have under government, such that the exam that the learner who pays school fee writes is also going to be the same as the exam that is written by someone who's in quintile 1, 2, or 3. So that is how our education system is divided. You don't necessarily have to be a person who's forced to study under NSC, which will require you to not pay anything. If you believe in whatever that you believe in, which is something that we're fighting for, maybe you believe that IEB has a better education system than NSC, you can go and take root into that. But we're also saying that as well, understanding that IEB has a better education system, we need a transformation again of the NSC part so that the learners who are studying in quintile 1, 2, and 3 schools can actually grow as well educationally, can actually grow as well in becoming literate in many ways, being digitally literate, being literate in the access to in their knowledge of information, just as in fact the ones in IEB. I think we could speak the entire day of this one because it's a very broad thing to actually speak about, that of how the education system in our country is actually divided, how there's a difference between a certain type of a student and the other. But I do want to say, as I learned, that there are in fact many measures that the government is putting in place to ensure that the difference between those two types of learners, one who comes from IEB and one who comes from NSC, is not really that much. You look, for example, the developments that are happening in Gauteng, many schools in Tembisa, for example, just a black people society or community. There's schools that have interactive whiteboards. There's schools that are provided for whiteboards that no longer use chalk, where you will find even learners have a tablet. So that shows to you that there are in fact programs, transformative programs that are being brought into our education system so that we can strike a balance between the public schools and the private schools, as it were. Then we could have a set of learners who have the same understanding, who have the same skill that they bring to higher education and to the working environment as a whole.
In terms of NSC, there's generally been a lot of outcry around the standards, with them 40% being required to pass and 30% in some cases. Can you give us background as to why that is?
I mean, it's a basic construct, I would say. It's a basic construct that is required, that is correct to actually implement, because the 40% and 30% you would find they apply in critical subjects such as your mathematics, English, and the home language, which can be anything that you speak, you Swati, Afrikaans, Xhosa, or even English home language itself. So this applies to, let me say, major subjects that a learner actually takes in high school. Because quite frankly, you cannot have a learner who chooses that I want to be literate, I want to understand English, and then you will have that learner proceeding on to the next grades with an English percentage of 30%. That tells you that the learner has completely no understanding of what is being taught in class, and so doesn't really understand this entire English. That learner is going to get out into the world environment or into the environment of academia, where there's just broadly English as a communication and as a medium of instruction, but will not be able to use it because themselves have been failing this English from when they began with their education up until the end. And so to ensure that we put in a measure that will ensure that education is being delivered to these learners, and that we don't rob them of themselves and lie to ourselves in saying that we're actually creating people who have an understanding and who have knowledge of particular subjects. Such things as a 30% benchmark in order for you to progress to another grade are actually required, because if they are not there, we are going to have a haphazard education system where a student can just go to the next grade without basic understanding of what it is that is taught, in what he or she is going to learn at a university level, in what he or she is going to learn at a working place level. For example, speaking about mathematics specifically, mathematics is South Africa's demand because it is part of the STEM degrees that South Africa actually requires. You know, you speak of your accounting sciences, economic sciences at a university level, actuarial sciences, and all of those degrees within business sciences and a Bachelor of Commerce. All of these degrees require an understanding, a thorough understanding of mathematics. So if you are going to have learners who continue to do mathematics, whereas they don't even pass it well, we are going to have learners who are being generated out of the basic education system into the higher education system to pursue degrees that South Africa does not need. And so we are going to have a weak workforce within our country that is not going to accommodate the basic needs, economic and social needs that our country has. So those measures, they are broader than just what you see at school. They actually go on to what we expect to see at higher education level, and they go on to become a broader aspect of our workforce in South Africa, because in reality we demand, South Africa is in demand of people who are going to understand mathematics for the purposes of pursuing, for example, such things as data analytics, which is something that we need in South Africa. Those things are things that the economy itself is in need of. Pursuing economics, in fact, pursuing accounting, we are in need of those things. Our business sector is not being transformed. It's not growing anywhere today because those very major and important subjects are not really being applied critically from a basic education level. So putting those measures is a way of trying to ensure that at a basic education level, we are applying a correct education being delivered to students, and we are creating here a workforce that will be relevant to the economy of our country.
I understand what you're saying when it comes to the bottom line, that it does need to be a basic fundamental standard, yeah? But would one not argue that 50% should be what's considered a basic understanding? So why would it be why would it be 40 considered basic understanding and not 50%?
I mean, again, you want to look at it from all sides, because you want to also cater for students who do not necessarily need these subjects, but actually want to venture into different areas. I mean, you want to ensure that in as much as you want to encourage an education system that only produces what South Africa needs, you also encourage an education system that produces a student who has their own ambitions and wants to take their own decisions on what to pursue, right? So you don't want to set a margin that will be so great that it will force even students who don't want to actually pursue maths to pass maths very well and to focus on maths, leaving other subjects outside.
So that's like someone that wants to do marketing.
Marketing.
They don't need maths.
They don't really need maths. Your law, those people just need your level 3s in mathematics, and then they are up there. They become the greatest lawyers you've ever seen without really passing maths that much, because it's not something that they will ever meet with. They will just meet with a large amount of content that they need to memorize at a university level. And also taking into account the fact that in as much as you want to create that margin for learners, for many learners, you also don't want to give strain to a majority of learners such that there's just going to be failing again and again in our education as it is. I mean, the truth of the matter is that most of the learners within our basic education system, specifically looking at quintile 1s to quintile 3s, are learners that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So if you say that learner who knows completely nothing maybe of this mathematics and this English from where they really come from must get something above 50%, it might be that it's a bit too much for them. So we need also, in as much as we want to set that margin to encourage a generation of better skill into our economy, we need also to consider that there are going to be learners who are not going to be so motivated when they see themselves failing and will just actually drop out. So one of the things that improve, in fact, the dropout rates, learners will just go into school, they see that the targets that are set for them by the education system are too high for them to meet, and so it's actually useless for them to actually proceed with their studies.
You touched earlier to say that great work has been done and there's still more work to do, acknowledging that there are challenges. What are some of the challenges that currently exist that CoSAS, working with ANC, are hoping to change in the next administration?
Well, it's no longer the basic issues, because in general, CoSAS was an organization, because at the time what transpired, in fact, were basic challenges such as your social security. They still exist until today. we acknowledge that many learners still have pit toilets. They still use pit toilets. We acknowledge that sanitary towels are not being delivered into schools freely, as you would see condoms being delivered freely, for example, in clinics. We acknowledge that there's uniforms, in fact, some schools don't deliver free uniforms to learners, as you would see prisoners getting free a prison uniform in a prison. So all of those things, we acknowledge them, but we are saying upfront with developing our education into becoming better to embrace the method and the way in which our learners are actually thinking and the way in which they can think. And so in doing that, we need to transform our South Africa from what it is currently, and it needs to be also in the mainstream economy as many other countries that are being transformed digitally today. So we're saying that students must be offered laptops, students at high school level must be offered interactive whiteboards, students at high school level must no longer use chalkboards, they must now use whiteboards. Those are the things that are going to embrace our education. Those are the things that are going to ensure that there's efficiency within our education. And of course, we're coupling all of those demands with the need to improve infrastructure in our schools, which is a great challenge, because the picture of having a classroom that is so bad on the outside, the exterior, you look at it, you just say, this classroom is not on a good state. It looks like a shack, or it looks like an impoverished a household or of some sort. You will not expect, or the picture, in fact, of that type of a classroom having a tablet and an interactive whiteboard inside will be so bad. So we are coupling all of this demand to say digital improvement and digital development in South Africa should be there, but coupling that with infrastructure development, which is, by the way, a demand that we've had for years as CoSAS, a demand that we've had for years to say our schools need to have a budget that is allocated to maintenance, a maintenance budget, so to say, wherein we are just going to know that when a school is ruined infrastructurally, there's a budget placed to ensure that those particular schools are actually improved once more. We cannot be having schools that were built in 2004, but then currently under a state of just badness. Infrastructurally, you cannot see any improvement in that school. There's still pit toilets, but the school was there since 2004. There's no improvement of any nature whatsoever, in fact, in the infrastructure and the way the school is looking. So we're saying that there should be a maintenance budget that is allocated by the government of the ANC, and it should do that after the elections. It should do that, in fact, to try and embrace education. And we know and understand very well that the ANC is the only government that you will see that wants and is ambitious, very, very ambitious, to improve, in fact, the education system. So I understand and know that it is fully capable to actually do that for us as CoSAS and as the broader population of learners. Hence, we are putting these demands forward and saying that this is not a request even, it's a demand, because we know that you are capable of doing it. And so you must actually do it for us, and you must do it for the benefit of our country generally.
You've touched on some of the challenges that the ANC government has had in the progress, particularly infrastructure-wise. With regards to the social issues, what is CoSAS and ANC putting forward to deal with some of the issues like teenage pregnancies, the sugar daddies issues, things like that? How's CoSAS and ANC planning to address those?
The government generally has been quiet on these social issues that our schools are being confronted by, because the general manner of responding to them has been the minister will go on TV and address that this happened in this particular place and that the Department of Basic Education is disappointed, and then the educator will become suspended. If an educator, for example, molests a female a child, or an educator does something completely wrong to a child, or there's no social security in a school, there's no sanitary pads, as you would have mentioned, and basically students are just falling pregnant, they don't understand the value of education, there's going to be several addresses to actually start and address that, there's not going to be a practical solution to it, which is that of bringing about not only training to social workers, because this education does not lie with social workers that the Department of Basic Education always says it has for our schools. It lies within the educators themselves, because we have many educators in high school who do not know how to respond to the social issues that learners at high school level are having. Many educators who believe that life orientation as a program of a social program for learners is the solution to these learners and not falling pregnant, not going under these social challenges that we speak of, which is not the case. We need to have now educators, because I'm told that they are even taught at a university level psychology. So they are supposed to go back to school understanding how to deal with these social security issues that our learners are being confronted by at school. You speak, for example, about corporal punishment, which is also another big issue that we as CoSAS are speaking against in our high schools. How it actually comes about? It comes about because of an unskilled teacher base in our high school level. Educators were completely unable to respond to the possible personalities and characters that different students or different learners can actually have. And so it's a matter of bringing more skill to educators and bringing more of the psychosocial support that the Department of Education has actually enacted as part of its legislation that it has under the South African Schools Act to actually assist students to cope mentally, to cope psychologically with everything that is happening under the education system. So we're saying that educators should be trained. They should have an understanding of what learners are going through. Me as a learner, I cannot define myself better than the educator can define me. The educator must be able to define me better than I can define my own self, because the basic understanding is that I am not matured enough to have the capability and the capacity to think so much of myself. Then therefore, that is why the educator comes in to give me knowledge, to give me teaching, to give me education on who I am, so that when I come out of an education, of the basic education level, I come out as a finished product of self that is just out there to bring about a better skilling and reskilling of self, not as a person who's going to go out there being aggressive because the educator at high school was aggressive themselves. They beat me, there was corporal punishment. I went to school, I was angry, I didn't even listen in class. That is just going to affect me for the entirety of my life. That thing could be changed at a basic education level. Teachers should be trained more, and the education and the Department of Education must invest more on the psychosocial support that it says it must actually provide. There must be a psychologist literally in every school in South Africa, because South Africa requires a set of students, a set of learners that are mentally sound. We have seen many incidents where learners act very abruptly, where they just disrupt school, where some even carry knives, some even guns. Had many cases in Western Cape where learners are reported to have guns that they threaten teachers to actually respond in a certain way using. So we need to have a trained a base of educators, and we need to have psychosocial support being roped into our education system at the earliest levels of grade R, in fact, for our students, because that is where the critical things that we're crying about start. That is where bullying starts. That is where the lack of social security starts. That is where the lack of many things and many needs that learners have actually begins. So that is perhaps our view as CoSAS.
You know, in what you're saying there is a general approach that there's all this focus that ANC, governments, CoSAS should do this, should do that. What is the role of parents, brothers, sisters in the education system?
With parents, it's a universal role, I would say. It's not even a subjective role that you could say, me as a parent, I have this particular role and I'm identifying with that. It's a universal role. It's a role that goes with how morally defined society is, you know, how morally and ethically defined our society is today. The parent acts, in fact, as the community to the child, because the parent has the responsibility to become the educator to this child, to ensure that when they come back from school, they would have done their homeworks. When they come back from school, this child is fine in terms of the food that they are going to eat. Now is acting as a provider to this student. When they come back from school, I am not going to feed this child with too much stressful issues that they're not going to be able to deal with. It's things that are happening in our homes today that are affecting social security at school. It's things that are happening in our homes today that make our learners to act in ways that one could conclude, maybe in a lack of a better word, and minding my language, of course, is psychotic. You know, you find learners in the school acting as if they are completely out of themselves. It's people who don't have a soul. It's people who just hate everything. It's effects of what happens basically at a home level, even though maybe we don't have, maybe this is a space of SANCO, and so to say, that of encouraging parents to address issues that their children are being faced with. We must have parents that are self-educated enough to speak about personal issues that their children are being faced with, to speak about the things that are happening in the personal lives of their children, to speak about the issue that is happening at home of my mother beating my father, to speak about the issue that is happening at home of not having a father. I cannot see my father, it's been years. That is affecting me mentally. You need a parent that is going to tell you that this is what is happening, this is how we are going to fix it. You don't have a father, and that is true. Someone that's going to address that, someone that's going to encourage you to go forward. Because one of the issues, one of the challenges that our learners are faced by at school is that of their backgrounds, where they come from. They are not really solid. They do not have a firm foundation on teachings that they have at school. There's many challenges. I could mention a lot, in fact, of responsibilities that our parents should actually play. You speak, for example, of situations where you have parents who open ship-ins and taverns within a home where there's a child who is going to school every day, which is something that is basically illogical, because you are going to open a tavern for someone who's doing matric, who wants to matriculate, or who's doing pre-matric, who wants to go to matric in the next year, in a place where you intend to ensure that this just becomes a study environment, but you turn from being that into being a hell where the child will actually receive the best way of being distracted from school. So we must have considerate parents. You know, we must have considerate parents. Of course, I do understand that many parents, many parents, black parents, in fact, do not have incomes, so to say, that they could use to actually afford this type of lifestyle. But if you are able to sell alcohol, it means that you are able to sell commodities such as commodities sold in a supermarket, and you could actually make a profit of that. There's nothing that compels you, if you have enough capital to buy alcohol, to actually go buy that alcohol instead of buying commodities such as those sold in a spaza shop, to also cater for the child that is within. So it is a universal role. It is a role that, in fact, is defined by the very ethics and the morals of society and our community in general.
With all of that said, what reason would you give for why, if someone is to ask why should I vote for ANC, what would you say?
The reasons are many, but I'll just mention a few. The ANC government has done a lot of people a huge favor. I'm one of those people, in fact, who have been done a favor by the ANC government, because I had this testimony that when I was in grades 1 to 3, grade R to 3. In fact, in my senior secondary school, I would get a feeding scheme at school. And then every year during December, there were going to be food parcels that were going to be given to learners so that I would bring at home. I'm one of those people, in fact, that the ANC government provided food for, that the ANC government was able to feed, that the ANC government was able to actually say, one of these learners will progress from this level to that level because of its works. I mean, the limit to what a government can do could be that it provides you basic education and for you to actually learn. But going further to provide for you food for you to eat, going further to even provide groceries that you can bring home to sustain you for the whole December period.
Is this also outside of election period?
It is outside of it. It is within. It happens at it's something that happened with me throughout my.
No, I think because there's the narrative that it's only during election time.
Oh no.
Come. Okay.
Oh no, I was doing grade R up until grade 3 for 4 years, but I remember that within that 4 years, for the full 4 years, I always received food parcels to bring home every end of the year when I was in my public school, because I was schooling in a public school at the time. So every end of the year, I was receiving a parcels. It wasn't that it's the 5th year now, so after election, so we're going towards election, so the ANC is trying to make itself look better. No. It was happening throughout that interval of time. That is just one of the examples. There's bigger programs that the ANC has been able to implement, that of bringing a larger number of people who are marginalized from apartheid to a state that is so better today, you know, improving provinces within our country that were just not cared for by the apartheid government, that were not cared for, in fact, even during the current era of politics, wherein those provinces were led by different political parties. For example, you know, where there's specific municipalities that were led by specific political organizations. You look at your Ekurhuleni, for example, after the ANC came out of power and there was a DA that led in that municipality, there were certain disasters that were beyond the control of the people of the area, you know, and Johannesburg as well. The coalitions there are just causing problems. There's havoc. It's no longer the city that we really know. It's something that is completely out of the picture now. So the ANC had programs before that catered for improvement and development of Johannesburg as a city. But today we are saying that there's havoc caused there because now the ANC was moved out of power. There's many programs that the ANC still seeks to actually implement, you know. You look at how improved, you know, the issue of load shedding has been over the time when the president decided to actually stand and say, we are addressing this issue head on. We moved from stage 6, and we started going down to stage 2, you know, and up until a point where we could stay for about a month or weeks without having load shedding. Improvements came in the form of statistics to say 65% of the times now there's not going to be load shedding in South Africa as a whole. We are just going to move smoothly. So there's a lot of programs that one could speak for. There are a lot of programs that speak to uplifting the poor majority of South Africans who still need to participate in the mainstream economy, who are outside of the mainstream economy. In fact, that the ANC is still taking out of poverty and pulling into the mainstream economy, that the ANC has taken out of poverty, in fact, and that which the ANC still has programs for, to ensure that those people and those citizens in those particular areas are able to become uplifted from the poverty that they're experiencing right now. So quite frankly, it is the hope of South Africa. I don't believe in any other political organization that has better policies than the ANC, policies that could uplift our economy in the way that it has done from 1994 up until today.
That's the past 30 years. What would you say the next 30 years under the ANC government will look like?
Projecting the future, it's looking at the policies that the ANC has done today, because most of the policies that the ANC has introduced today are policies that are going to be transformative over generations to generations to generations. You speak, for example, of your NHI. It's a policy that is going to start booming within 10 years from now. That is going to ensure that South Africans receive the greatest health care that they've ever received before, You speak of the bill that was passed where in South Africa could have its own state-owned bank. You know, those are policies of the ANC that will work so much better for South Africa. Those are policies of the ANC that will bring so much better upliftment for South Africa. The ANC does not have short-term programs that do not speak to ensuring that even in the future we are still sustained. The ANC programs speak to sustaining a South African citizen from when they are born throughout the entirety of their lives up until their workplace. Many policies cater for generations and generations to come. That is why we have South Africans who have been growing from 1994 up until this year, because since the ANC took power in 1994, it instilled programs that are future orientated that would ensure that up until 2024 as we are today, there's going to be citizens who are going to benefit from the very same programs that we have implemented. You speak of your triple BE, for example, where we see black people being employed into managerial positions, black people being entrepreneurs, black people being big components of the state because of the economy, rather, because of the enacting of that one particular policy. So it's a lot that the ANC has still yet to done, but it's a lot that it has also achieved.
No. Thank you for making time for us. Happy birthday. Hope that it's another great 45 years for CoSAS.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
For you guys, thank you for tuning in. With me, your host, TJ Maslela. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share in the comment section. Put what you would like to hear, what you thought about the episode. And don't forget to tune in. TJ signing out.